Hello, I'm R.A. Spratt, and I want to welcome people joining us this week on the Yoto podcast platform. Now, just so you know, most of the bedtime stories I tell here are standalone stories. But over the last year, we have been dipping in and out of the epic story of Odysseus, the hero from ancient Greek mythology. And this week, I'm going to be telling the second last installment of that tale. So if you can jump in right here, that'll be fine. I'm sure you'll pick it all up. But if you did want to go back to the beginning and start from the first episode, you can search back through the episodes. The first episode's called Odysseus, as told by Nanny Piggins, and it dropped on January 8th, 2025. Or you can go back and listen to any of the other episodes. You're going to find fairy tales, myths, legends, and mysteries. I hope you enjoy them all. Now let's get into it. Hello and welcome to Bedtime Stories with me, R.A. Spratt. Well, it's a drizzly morning. Oh, actually, it's afternoon now. It's just gone 12 here in Bowral. Lovely as ever, but distinctly wet. I took the dog out for a walk and we both got pretty wet. Bobby is here with me. I'm not sure where he is. Now, Bobby is my new puppy, for those of you who aren't following along. He's 7 months old. He's looking at me because I've said his name several times. Now, my previous dog, Henry, he sat in on, like all the first 330, 40 episodes of the podcast, and you never would have noticed because he barely ever made a sound. My new dog is not the same. He's a 7-month-old puppy, and he likes to systematically destroy things, which is okay because we love him and we accept this is part of his nature, but and he probably will grow out of it eventually. But if you do hear like a crunching, munching in the background of this podcast, rest assured, it's just my puppy. And he's, in real life, he's gorgeous. Like, if you go on Instagram, you can see my pictures of him if you want. And he's a lovely, lovely boy. We love him dearly. So we just put up with him munching on things. And so you too, by extension, may have to put up with listening to him munch on things. At the moment, he's eating a picture frame, which I know you probably think, why are you letting him eat your picture frames? Well, you see, it's Sunday here, and I did go to the butcher to get him a bone so that he would eat the bone while I was doing the podcast. But the butcher had no bones, which I thought was deeply ironic. Anyway, I'm not going to judge them for not having bones at the butcher shop. So when I came home, he was eating, like the picture frame was already broken. So I just thought, well, it's already broken. I should probably buy a new one. So I'll just see how long it takes him to destroy that one. He's moving on at the moment. You can hear him scratching the carpet. He's trying to get something out. When he gets it out, I'll see what it is and make a judgment call about whether I'll let him destroy that too. Oh, he's going for my Ugg boots. No, he can't have those. Hang on. I actually do have a pair of Ugg boots that he's partially eaten. But I have a pair of Ugg boots that I prefer for him not to eat. All right, go back to eating something you're allowed to eat. He's looking at me with his beautiful big eyes and so innocent. Anyway, let's ignore him. All right, so it's exciting. Heaps of people have joined us on the podcast just in the last week through the Yoto platform, which I believe is really big in the UK and Europe. So welcome to everyone on Yoto. It did make me think you probably have no idea who I am, because the podcast is called Bedtime Stories with R.A. Spratt. And because most of the Yoto listeners seem to be in the UK and Europe, I've never had any books published there. You see, people in Australia know me because I've published 33 books, children's books, and I've had 7 books published in North America, America and Canada. So over there, people have a bit of an idea about who I am. But if you're in the UK, rest assured, I'm a children's author. I'm the real deal. I've written 33 books. They're all bestsellers. So if you want to get hold of any of the books, you can actually order them online, or you can go into your local bookstore in England, and there's a distributor in the UK who can get them to your local bookstore. So if you want to find out more about who I am and what I've done in my life, you can go to raspratt.com, because I've been a writer for years now. Like, I've been doing this podcast for 6 years. But before that, I've been a writer, it's nearly 30 years now, because I was a television writer for 10 years. And then I wrote my first book back in 2006, and that was The Adventures of Nanny Piggins. And obviously that character stuck. I've written lots of other things, like Friday Barnes is actually my biggest book series. But with the podcast, Nanny Piggins has made a real resurgence. In COVID times, when we all needed a bit of reassurance, I was very glad to start writing Nanny Piggins again because her wild optimism, it was really good for me to have her back in my head. So I started writing these fairy tales and histories and Greek myths. So that's how we've come to be where we are today, with me getting Nanny Piggins to retell all these classic stories. And there's lots of other episodes of the podcast you'll see if you go back through. There's like Friday Barn stories, there's Tall Tale stories, bits from my other books. Oh, the Pesky Kids. I did the Pesky Kids for a couple of years there too. Anyway, that's enough introduction. You've had enough of that, and we really want to get on with the story because we're coming up to the last bit. This is the last installment of Odysseus and the Odyssey, because, we've been doing this since January 2025, so just over a year. And I'm going to read you the last installment today. I just want to say I really, really enjoyed bringing this to you. I only vaguely knew about the Odyssey. When I was a kid, there was a television show called Ulysses, and Ulysses is just, the Odyssey rebranded for the Romans. And it was like, Ulysses. That's all I remember of the TV show. That was the soundtrack. So anyway, I learnt a lot. And I knew a bit about the Cyclops and the guy, yes, but I learnt a lot doing this. So it's been really fun bringing this to you. And because the movie is coming out, the Chris Nolan movie, of The Odyssey is coming out in June or July. My publisher is going to make the podcast scripts that I've written for you, they're going to release them as a book at the same time that the big movie comes out. And so I've literally just finished editing that yesterday. So this that I'm going to do for you today, this podcast episode, and all the other episodes that I've done on the Odyssey through the last year, they've collected them all up, and it's going to be a book coming out in June. So that's something to look forward to. But as I say, that's not why you're here to hear what's going on in my life. You want to hear the last installment of the Odyssey. So let's get into it. I'll just recap. So where we left off was Odysseus had landed back on Ithaca after 10 years in the Trojan War and 3 years of traveling and being attacked by monsters everywhere, and then 7 years held hostage by Calypso. Finally, Odysseus is back in Ithaca, but Odysseus had the good sense not to go straight back to the palace because she sensed that there'd be people there that didn't want her to return. So she went to get the help and to get the tea from her beloved, well, not beloved, that's not the right word, her devoted, that's not even the right word either, the swineherder, who she knew she could really trust and was really wise. So the swineherder, this is a bit of a challenging name for me to say, is called Eumaeus. So we're picking up with Odysseus has been talking to Eumaeus and been reunited with her son Telemachus. And this is where we're going to pick up the story today. Here we go. The following morning, Odysseus, Telemachus, and Eumaeus, the swineherder, walked down from the hills and into the palace. Odysseus was again disguised as a beggar. When they arrived at the great hall, all the suitors were sitting down to lunch, guzzling cake from Odysseus's own kitchen and drinking chocolate milk from Odysseus's own dairy. The sight of such selfish gluttony enraged Odysseus. She wished the Cyclops, or Scylla, the six-headed lizard, were there at that moment to punish these ill-mannered suitors. But they weren't, so Odysseus would just have to dispatch them herself. Now, because Odysseus had entered the palace in her disguise, no one recognised her. They took her to be a beggar, and as such, the suitors were all very rude. When Odysseus politely asked for food, they jeered at her and told her to go away. Some of them even threw their cups and dishes at Odysseus to try and get rid of her. It took all of Odysseus's strength of will not to throw off her disguise right then and there and give them all a good hard stomp on the foot and a bite on the shin. But time and many near-death experiences had taught Odysseus patience. Her beloved husband, Penelope, sat at the head of the table, and he was disgusted by the behaviour of the suitors. He chided them for their rudeness. "You must not behave so. The gods frown on people who do not show respect and hospitality to guests." "This isn't a guest," said one suitor. "It's just a filthy old beggar, too lazy to do an honest day's work." "I have worked harder than anyone in this room," said Odysseus. "Only because you've been alive so much longer than any of the rest of us," jeered another suitor. The rest cackled at the joke. "Come and sit by me, beggar," said Penelope kindly. "I have food enough to share." Odysseus sat down, and Penelope shared the cake from his own plate and the chocolate milk from his own cup, not realising this was actually his beloved wife. Odysseus was moved to tears to be sitting next to her beloved husband again and discover that he was still the same wonderful and generous, if not very observant, man she had always loved. "Tell me, your majesty," Odysseus asked Penelope as she ate, "do you still love your wife?" Penelope did not respond in words. He was silent for one moment. Then he burst into loud, racking sobs. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you," said Odysseus, trying to comfort Penelope by patting him on the shoulder. "I miss her so much," wailed Penelope between sobs. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said anything so insensitive," said Odysseus. "It's okay, it's not your fault. It's just she's been gone for so long that the sadness is unbearable," said Penelope. "Also, there's something about you that reminds me of Odysseus, except that you are much, much, much older and more haggard." "Well, older women are attractive in a different way," argued Odysseus. "Really? I suppose so," said Penelope. At this point, Telemachus got to his feet and clapped his hands to get everyone's attention. "I have an announcement to make," declared Telemachus. "Are you going to renounce your claim to the throne?" asked a suitor. "No," said Telemachus. "I have decided, as Odysseus' son and the heir to the throne of Ithaca, that it is time for my father to remarry." "What?" cried Penelope, leaping to his feet. "Telemachus, you would do that to me?" "Yes, father," said Telemachus. "Odysseus must be dead by now." He winked at Odysseus as he said this. "It's time for me to take the throne, so you need to move out and set up your own palace somewhere else." Penelope sobbed, but then bravely regained control of himself. "I don't want to," he said, "but you are the heir to the throne, so I must do as you say. Although it will break my heart if I have to marry someone else. I will cry all the time, which will make it very miserable for them at meal times or when they're trying to read a book quietly." Yes, very well. Do as you like," said Telemachus. "Now the question is, how do I choose which one of you suitors gets to marry my father?" "Choose the richest," urged the richest suitor. "Choose the best looking," urged the best looking suitor. "Choose the one with the biggest boat," urged the suitor who owned the biggest boat. "No, I shall hold a contest to decide which suitor is most suitable," said Telemachus. "Eumaeus, fetch me my mother's bow." Odysseus' bow, that she'd used for hunting and firing arrows at bad people, was hung on the wall of the great hall. It had been hung there for 20 years since Odysseus set out for Troy. Eumaeus, the swineherder, stood on a chair to take it down, then carried it over to Telemachus. Now, this was an old-fashioned bow made of wood, not the carbon composite or plastic types of bows used by modern archers. It had been unused for 20 years. In the ancient Greek story days, when you weren't using your bow, you took the string off to protect the wood, which meant the first thing you had to do to fire a bow was to re-string it. "The first suitor to string this bow and then fire it through the wrist loops of 10 axes shall be the one to marry my father," declared Telemachus. The suitors cheered with delight. This sounded like an easy challenge to them. They all rushed forward to line up and have a go. Telemachus had set out 10 axes, embedding the blades in the table so that the handles stood upright and the wrist straps aligned like a long tunnel of targets. Then he handed over the bow to the first suitor to have an attempt. The strongest suitor stepped forward first and grabbed the bow and the string. She tied one end of the string to the bottom and took hold of the other end of the string, but she couldn't get the bow to bend, so she couldn't attach the string to the top. The other suitors laughed and teased the suitor for not being as strong as she looked. Then, one by one, the other suitors stepped forward to have their try, and one by one, they failed. When the last suitor couldn't bend the bow, let alone attach the string, she threw it on the ground in disgust. "This bow is broken. It's been hanging unused on the wall for too long. It's impossible to bend." "Let me try," said Odysseus. The suitors all turned and glared at the presumptuous beggar. "As if you could do it. You're just a worthless, incredibly old beggar," said a suitor, throwing a jug at Odysseus to get her to go away. Let the beggar try, said Telemachus. Penelope's feelings were hurt by his son's words. Are you so eager to be rid of me that you would marry me to a beggar? He asked. If this beggar can string that bow, then she may be more than she seems, said Telemachus. Odysseus picked up the bow. Holding the old bow in her hands again felt good. It was exactly as she remembered. She'd spent many happy hours firing arrows from it. Odysseus took the string, attached it to the bottom of the bow, and braced that end against her foot. Then she bent the other end down so the string easily slotted into the notch at the other end. All the suitors gasped. She might be able to string it, but she'll never be able to fire an arrow through all 10 wrist straps, jeered a suitor. She's too old. Her hands will shake. Odysseus took an arrow from the quiver and held it to the bow. She lined up her shot through the wrist straps and fired. The arrow flew through all 10 wrist straps with deadly accuracy. There was stunned silence in the room. Gosh, said Penelope. Odysseus? Is that you? That's right, said Odysseus, leaping up on the table and whipping off her beggar's disguise. You have all been bested by the best person here. Me, Odysseus, rightful queen of Ithaca. I have returned home to be with my beloved husband, to care for the good people of Ithaca, and to drive out all of you very rude, very naughty suitors. What if we refuse to go? Said the boldest of the suitors. Greek hospitality laws say you still have to feed us. After insulting my husband and ransacking my kitchens, you say you want more food? Asked Odysseus. The suitors all nodded. They had wanted to marry Penelope, but if they couldn't, they would settle for eating Odysseus's fine cake and drinking her mellow chocolate milk for the rest of their lives. Fine, said Odysseus. Then I shall bring in my friends, who shall serve you food. Eumaeus, bring in your ladies. Eumaeus threw open the doors to the great hall, and an enormous herd of spectacularly beautiful and well-cared-for pigs flooded into the room, and they were all carrying big sacks full of cakes. Rock cakes. Now, these pigs knew how to bake the finest, lightest sponge cake, but that was not what the situation called for, and when they put their mind to it, they could make rock cakes that bore a stark resemblance to real rocks. Some may have contained real rocks, in fact. The suitors began to realize that they had made a terrible mistake. Ladies, called Odysseus, serve them their cake. Every pig in the room started hurling rock cakes at the suitors. It was the first and most brutal food fight ever recorded in history. The pigs drove the greedy suitors out of the hall with their well-aimed, cakey blows. The suitors ran down to the harbour to escape on their boats, only stopping occasionally to shove a chunk of rock cake into their mouths as they ran away, for they may have contained rocks, but they were still delicious. Oh, Penelope, said Odysseus, can you forgive me for taking so long to return? Oh, I do want to be cross with you, admitted Penelope, but I'm so relieved that the suitors are finally gone, and relieved that you're not dead, so I don't have to remarry. But are you pleased to see me? Asked Odysseus, feeling a little shy, because she was 20 years older, and she had been bashed about by various monsters over the years. Odysseus, said Penelope, you may be 20 years older, but you are still staggeringly beautiful, and it is just a fact that it is hard to stay angry with someone when they are so gorgeous to look at. Ah, said Samantha. Michael, you'd better cover your ears, said Nanny Piggins, because you're not going to like the next bit. And so Odysseus kissed Penelope, and the kissing went on for quite a bit. They had a lot of lost time to make up for, and they lived happily ever after on Ithaca for the rest of their days. The end. Time for cake. Wow, said Derek. What a crazy journey. If the school bus took 20 years to drive us home from school, I'd be really cross, said Michael. Well, it would have been a lot quicker if the gods didn't keep interfering, said Samantha. I always thought Zeus was such a rotter, but Poseidon is 10 times worse. Yes, agreed Nanny Piggins. But if it weren't for the gods, Odysseus' journey would have been a very short and boring story, which it is not. It was a journey so awful and weird and dangerous that we had to invent an entirely new word for it, Odyssey. Have you ever been on an odyssey, Nanny Piggins? Asked Michael. Oh, yes, said Nanny Piggins. Back in my circus days, I accidentally ate a slice of carrot cake. Gosh, no, exclaimed Boris. Yes, you see, the cake was brown, said Nanny Piggins, dabbing a tear away from her eye at the dreadful memory. I had no way of knowing. I assumed it was a chocolate cake. Were you all right? Asked Derek. Now, Derek actually quite liked carrot cake himself, but he was aware that his nanny had very strong opinions about people who put vegetables in cakes. Not at all, said Nanny Piggins. I was so distressed that night at the circus, I misjudged the trajectory of my cannon and accidentally fired myself onto a passing train. Oh dear, said Samantha. And we were performing in Vladivostok at the time, and the passing train was the Trans-Siberian Railway, added Nanny Piggins. Isn't that a 9,289-kilometre journey? Asked Derek. Yes, said Nanny Piggins. And the train conductor refused to give me a return ticket, despite the tap dancing show I put on in the dining car. But that is a story for another day. The end. All right. Well, that's it. Finally, the end of the Odyssey. We're going to leave it there. I hope you enjoyed that epic story. As I said last week, we've got lots more. I've got lots more ideas for stories coming up. Joan of Arc, the Kraken, lots of things. And if this book ends up doing well, I'll probably come back to Odysseus and all the Greek heroes, Achilles and whatnot, and do the story of the Trojan War, like as my next Greek myths book. Anyway, so that's it for now. Thank you for joining me, and until next time, goodbye. Hello, it's me again. If you enjoyed listening to Bedtime Stories with R.A. Spratt, it would be really helpful if you could like, subscribe, follow, and or review the show on whatever podcast platform you're listening to now. Every little one of those digital affirmations helps, and the bigger this podcast gets, the more I can justify procrastinating from my real job to keep bringing these stories to you. Thank you.